Pregnant wife faces complications in the ER. Millionaire husband's absence shocks the doctors. Selena Miles felt her entire body tremble as she clutched her swollen belly in the emergency room hallway. Every passing second felt like an eternity, while the doctors prepared for a procedure that would decide her fate and that of the precious life within her. Furious whispers floated around, nurses exchanging glances loaded with urgency and concern. Where was Adrian, her wealthy husband, who had promised her the world? How could a man who prided himself on lavish gifts and fancy galas abandon her at the most critical moment of their life together? The staff at Johns Hopkins Hospital couldn't believe it. Adrian Miles was not your typical millionaire. He was the talk of every major business magazine and swanky gathering. Often featured in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, his rags to riches story inspired thousands. It wasn't uncommon for people to whisper about how Adrian had transformed a small inheritance into a real estate empire that spanned continents. Wherever he appeared, camera flashes followed. His wife, Selena Miles, had met him before he became the unstoppable mogul. At the time, she was an art history student at a small college, fascinated by antique sculptures and Renaissance paintings. Adrian wasn't a polished billionaire back then. He was merely an ambitious young man working odd jobs to invest in small property flips. The moment Selena saw him, she noticed a spark of unrelenting determination. He might have been struggling, but his eyes were set on the stars. She admired that about him, and he adored her creativity and passion for art. Their early dating years were filled with quiet dinners in cramped apartments, heartfelt promises scribbled on notepads, and weekend road trips that cost them almost nothing. Adrian would drive her to small museums hidden away in tiny towns, listening intently as she explained the importance of long-forgotten artists and their works. In those days, money was tight, but their love was abundant. They believed wholeheartedly they were each other's destiny. Eventually, as Adrian's investments began to pay off, life changed dramatically. The couple started to attend black-tie galas in New York City, meeting influential realtors, bankers, and politicians. One successful property deal led to another. Soon, Adrian and Selena were living in a spectacular penthouse with windows that overlooked an ever-glowing city skyline. Their love seemed unstoppable, but with power and wealth came a new kind of pressure, both social and personal. Selena tried to stay grounded, drawing comfort from her passion for art and her dream to open an art gallery showcasing young talents. Adrian was supportive, at least in words, but his lifestyle had become fast and furious, making it harder for them to connect. Though everyone saw them as the perfect couple, wealthy, charming, and philanthropic, there was an unspoken distance that began growing between them. They had everything money could buy, but their emotional closeness started to wane. Work called him away to the far corners of the globe, while Selena tried to keep their home a sanctuary. She wanted to start a family. He wanted to expand his empire. Their goals, once aligned, were now diverging as quickly as his net worth climbed. Yet, she believed wholeheartedly that the love they had forged during those lean, hopeful days would endure any storm that came their way. After 8 years of marriage, Selena discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with immense joy and trepidation. For a moment, the distance between them vanished. When she handed Adrian the pregnancy test wrapped in a small velvet box, his eyes brimmed with tears. He lifted her off her feet, his elation on full display. For the first time in so long, they felt a sense of unity again. They rushed to share the news with close friends and family. Adrian made calls to his business associates, dropping hints that he might be taking some time off to prepare for fatherhood. He even boasted about buying the biggest and best in baby equipment, from custom Italian cribs to advanced strollers. But behind the scenes, The real estate market was turning unpredictable, and Adrian's biggest deals required his daily presence. He was in the midst of acquiring a massive commercial building in Europe, an endeavor that promised to double his fortune if it went through. Despite his excitement, Adrian found it nearly impossible to slow down or delegate important tasks. Every morning, he was on the phone before Selina even woke up. Business lunches overlapped with prenatal checkups that he either missed or arrived at late. The unborn baby was her priority now, especially since she had dreamed of becoming a mother for so long. But she was constantly torn between wanting Adrian to be present and understanding that his absence was tied to the financial future he was trying to secure for all of them. In their quieter moments, often after midnight, when Adrian finally returned home, she would lean on his shoulder, telling him about her fears and hope. He would rub her back, planting soft kisses on her forehead, mumbling assurances that he was by her side. She believed him, though the shadow of doubt grew bigger by the day. She feared that once the baby arrived, Adrian might find it even harder to step away from his business. Yet, clinging to love's memories, she prayed fervently that the birth of their child would anchor them back to the relationship they had cherished in their youth. As Selina's pregnancy progressed, trouble brewed beneath the surface. Selina began experiencing chronic fatigue, dizzy spells, and alarming pains in her lower back. Initially, she brushed them off as normal pregnancy symptoms, trusting that her body was simply adjusting to this new life growing within. But when sharp abdominal pains suddenly struck during a charity event, where Adrian was the guest speaker, she realized something more serious might be happening. Selina tried to catch Adrian's eye from where she stood at the back of the room, quietly wincing. She signaled that she wasn't feeling well, but Adrian was absorbed in a spirited conversation with a local politician about a lucrative property downtown. Her calls and gestures went unnoticed. Not wanting to make a scene, she slipped away to the ladies' room, splashed water on her face, and tried to steady her breathing. A close friend, Sasha, followed her in and was alarmed at how pale Selina looked. Insisting on driving her home, Sasha eventually helped Selina lie down, offering warm tea and calm reassurance. Adrian did not leave the event until hours later, brimming with the excitement of a new political ally. When he arrived at the penthouse, Sasha was furious at him. Her concern for Selina was palpable. He stood there, guilt flashing across his face, as Sasha berated him for ignoring his wife. Ultimately, Selina intervened to diffuse the tension, insisting she was fine and that Sasha should leave. Sasha cast one last, disapproving look at Adrian before departing. That night, Selina and Adrian slept on opposite sides of the bed, both awake, both silent, both aware that something had irrevocably changed. 2 days later, Selina made an appointment with her obstetrician. The doctor listened intently to her symptoms, ran some tests, and cautiously suggested that Selina should watch for any signs of increasing pain or unusual bleeding. While the initial results didn't indicate anything catastrophic, the doctor stressed the importance of rest and emotional support. The stress of a hectic lifestyle, combined with possible underlying conditions, could lead to a high-risk pregnancy if not managed properly. Selina tried to pass this message to Adrian, who nodded distractedly and promised he'd reduce his schedule soon. She wanted to believe him. After all, he was the father of her child. But each time her phone chimed with a new message from him, it was usually about a contract that needed immediate attention or a negotiation with foreign investors. Adrian was physically present some nights, but mentally he was 1,000 miles away. The tension at home started creeping into every corner of Selina's life, from her sleeping patterns to her interactions with friends. She felt isolated, longing for the version of Adrian who once watched the sunset with her on a rickety balcony, promising her the simplest of joys. One breezy afternoon, Selina was walking through a local farmer's market, looking for organic fruits and vegetables, thinking about baby names. She felt a twinge of excitement imagining the child's nursery, mentally painting walls in soft pastels. However, as she bent to pick up a basket of peaches, a paralyzing pain shot across her abdomen. Fear coiled in her heart. At first, she tried to brush it off, determined not to cause a scene. But moments later, she doubled over, her vision blurring from the intensity. Alarmed bystanders rushed to her side, calling an ambulance. Selina heard distant echoes of sympathetic voices. Someone held her hand, telling her help was on the way. In that haze of agony, she pressed a trembling hand to her belly, silently begging her unborn child to hold on. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and bright lights. Through the intermittent surges of pain, Selina gave the paramedics Adrian's phone number, urging them to call him. They wasted no time in placing the call. The paramedic's voice was loud in the small ambulance, explaining that his wife was in a serious condition and headed to Johns Hopkins Hospital. Selina heard only one side of the conversation. She tried to glean some comfort from the paramedic's tone, but her anguish drowned out all other senses. When they reached the emergency room, doctors and nurses whisked Selina into an examination area. The whir of medical machinery, the beep of vital monitors, and the frantic energy of the staff all blended into one anxious fog. She wanted Adrian to appear at any second, to take her hand and tell her it would be okay. Yet as the minutes ticked by, there was no sign of him. She told herself he must be in traffic, or that he was busy traveling for a sudden business crisis. But the ache in her heart whispered a much darker possibility that he wasn't coming, Doctor. Rivera, a seasoned obstetrician with salt and pepper hair, was the first to speak to Selina clearly about her condition. After a series of ultrasounds and blood tests, his face was tense but compassionate. He explained that Selina was experiencing complications related to placental insufficiency, an issue where the placenta did not provide enough oxygen and nutrients to the baby. Additionally, the added stress on Selina's body could be worsening her condition, risking both her and the unborn child. He emphasized the need for immediate rest and possible early delivery if the situation worsened. Selina tried to stay brave, but her tears betrayed her. She was alone, terrified, and uncertain of the future. Nurses came and went, administering the fourth fluids, taking her vital signs, and monitoring the fetal heartbeat. The last measure offered some relief. The baby's heartbeat was still strong. Even as her own strength seemed to fade, she latched on to the rhythmic whooshing sound that signaled life. The medical staff, used to seeing families crowd around anxious patients, noticed the stark absence of a partner or family member at Selina's side. Whispers of curiosity and concern filled the halls. They recognized her face. She was the wife of Adrian Miles, the real estate magnate whose name adorned charity donor walls across the country. How odd, they thought, that a man known for his generosity and love for his wife was nowhere to be found when she needed him most. Over the next hour, the hospital tried multiple times to reach Adrian. Each attempt went to voicemail or an automated reply. Dr. Rivera even tried contacting his assistant, but was told Mr. Miles was in a crucial virtual meeting regarding international investment deals. "I'll let him know, but he's quite occupied," the assistant had said dismissively. The tension was palpable. Selina felt the walls closing in on her. She replayed every memory of Adrian, telling her how excited he was to become a father, of how he'd never leave her side. She wondered if she had done something wrong, if maybe she'd demanded too much. Her thoughts spiraled, searching for answers as the clock ticked mercilessly. With each second, her condition felt as though it were teetering on the edge of disaster. It wasn't Adrian who walked through the ER doors next. It was Sasha, Selina's close friend. She arrived breathless, eyes wide with panic. She had heard from someone at the farmer's market that Selina had collapsed and been taken to the hospital. Without a second thought, she rushed to Selina's side, relieved to find her conscious and somewhat stable. Sasha's presence was a balm to Selina's shattered nerves. Immediately she asked, "Where's Adrian? Is he on his way?" The question echoed in the room, met with silence and a faint shake of Selina's head. Sasha's face reddened with disbelief and anger. Yet she forced a gentle tone as she spoke to Selina, reassuring her that everything would be okay, that the hospital staff was top-notch, and that she was there for whatever Selina needed. Together, they waited. Dr. Rivera returned periodically with updates, none of them definitive, but all of them cautionary. He insisted that Selina needed as much calm as possible in these critical hours to ensure the baby remained stable. Stress could exacerbate her symptoms, potentially leading to an emergency cesarean. Sasha tried to keep Selina's spirits up by telling light-hearted stories about her own childhood, about silly adventures they'd had in college, anything to distract her from the gaping hole where Adrian should have been. Finally, about 3 hours later, Adrian's assistant walked in. Not Adrian, his assistant, a man named Derek, who was polite but too formal for a moment like this. He handed Sasha a small typed note. On it, Adrian had scrawled a message: "I'm in the middle of the biggest deal of my life. If I don't conclude negotiations by midnight, we could lose a massive investment. Ensure Selina is well taken care of. I will arrive as soon as possible." Sasha read it out, loud, her voice trembling with anger and contempt. Selina turned away, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. The assistant left quickly, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional weight in the room. This was the first sign that the man she thought would always be her hero might actually be choosing money over her life and the life of their unborn child. Night fell, and Selina's condition held steady, though the pains still came intermittently. Dr. Rivera decided to keep her overnight for observation, hooking her up to monitors that tracked the baby's vital signs. Sasha refused to leave her side, insisting that she would remain until Adrian showed up. They talked in hushed tones through the night. The lull of machinery and occasional footsteps in the corridor were their only companions. During one particularly quiet moment, Selina confessed something she had kept hidden. "I found out last month that Adrian's deals are more precarious than he lets on. He owes a lot of investors, Sasha. We live big, but behind the scenes, there's constant pressure to keep everything afloat. He's been borrowing heavily to expand faster than anyone else in the market. I think that's why he's acting like this. He's terrified of losing it all." Sasha listened, gently squeezing Selina's hand. She could see the heartbreak in her friend's eyes. Selina wasn't defending Adrian so much as she was unveiling the vulnerabilities that had taken root in their marriage. For so long, Selina had tried to be the supportive spouse, but now the situation had spiraled out of control. The baby was at risk, and Adrian was nowhere to be found. In the corridor, a nurse passed by and overheard just enough to piece together that Adrian's absence might be tied to financial desperation, not mere selfishness. Rumors spread quickly in high society, and perhaps even quicker in hospital wards after midnight. Despite the hushed gossip, Sasha and Selina stuck together, forging a sense of solidarity in the face of uncertainty. By morning, Selina's doctors convened a quick briefing. Dr. Rivera explained that if her condition worsened or if the baby showed any signs of distress, they would have to consider an emergency C-section far earlier than Selina's due date. The mention of delivering prematurely made Selina's throat tighten with fear. She was barely in the 3rd trimester, and the risks to the baby were high. Sasha stepped out to get breakfast, determined to return quickly. Alone in the hospital room, Selina stared at the ceiling, trying to muster courage. She touched her belly, feeling small kicks that both comforted and terrified her. She whispered apologies to the child, tears sliding down her cheeks. She was sorry for the stress, sorry for not being stronger, and sorry that Adrian wasn't there to shield them. Around midday, something shifted. The baby's heartbeat monitor signaled a sudden irregularity. Alarms rang out. Nurses hurried in, adjusting Selina's position, trying to stabilize her blood pressure. Doctor Rivera quickly ordered an ultrasound to check if the placenta had deteriorated further or if there was another complication. The test revealed that the baby was not receiving adequate oxygen. In that frenetic moment, everything happened in a blur. The doctors called for the surgical team to prep for an emergency C-section. Selina was rushed into pre-op, fear clawing at her insides. She clutched Sasha's hand, pleading, "Find Adrian. Tell him it's happening now. I need him, please." Sasha nodded with tears in her eyes, running out into the hallway, frantically dialing every number she had for Adrian. Again, no direct response. She left voicemails and sent texts laced with urgency. With no other choice, she flung on a sterile gown and followed the medical team to the operating room door. Hospital regulations wouldn't allow her inside, but she could stay nearby, ready to offer comfort the moment Selina emerged. Inside the operating room, Selina trembled on the table as masked doctors and nurses tried to reassure her. They administered anesthesia, numbing her from the chest down, all the while explaining each step. The bright lights overhead reflected off stainless steel instruments, amplifying the surreal nature of what was happening. Selina felt pressure, tugging, and a flurry of movement behind the surgical drape. She closed her eyes, praying fervently, not just for herself, but for the child. The beeping monitors tracked her vitals, a steady but racing pulse. Then came the moment of relief and terror combined. The doctors lifted a tiny form from her womb. She heard a weak, feeble cry. Her baby was alive, but early. The staff rushed the newborn to an incubator, administering immediate care to support the underdeveloped lungs. Selina's tears flowed freely, a mixture of overwhelming joy and suffocating dread. She couldn't see the baby, only glimpses of movement behind the team working. She tried to call out for Adrian one last time, but her voice came out as a whisper, swallowed by the hum of medical machines. A nurse ran out to the waiting area, where Sasha stood, anxiously biting her nails. "The baby is out, and they're stabilizing Selina," the nurse informed. Sasha nearly collapsed with relief, tears running down her face, but still, Adrian was not there, and no one knew where he was. 2 hours later, Selina was in the recovery room, pale as a ghost but conscious. The baby remained in the neonatal intensive care unit (NICU), hooked up to advanced medical devices designed to give fragile newborns a fighting chance. Sasha hovered at Selina's bedside, comforting her with quiet reassurances. They managed brief visits to the NICU, but Selina was too weak to stand for long. Each time, she broke down in sobs, seeing her baby so small, so hooked up to tubes and machines. This was supposed to be a moment of joy, and instead, she felt lost. Late that night, when all seemed quiet, the door to Selina's hospital room finally slid open. Adrian entered, looking exhausted but oddly triumphant. His tie was askew, and he had dark circles under his eyes from long hours, but there was a spark of victory in his gaze that disgusted Sasha. He mumbled a greeting, eyes darting around as if expecting condemnation. Selina mustered the strength to speak first, her voice wavering. "Where were you? Did you know how close we came to losing our baby?" She motioned weakly to the NICU door down the hall. Adrian started to approach her bedside, but Sasha stepped between them, her eyes aflame. He explained in a halting tone that he had been on a conference call negotiating a high-stakes deal with European investors. The final contracts had been signed mere hours ago. I did it for us, for the baby," he stammered, but the hollowness of his words echoed against the sterile hospital walls. Selina's silence cut deeper than any shout or reprimand. Adrian turned to Sasha, desperate for an ally. "I told Derek to come. I trusted you'd all be fine. I left instructions." Sasha raised a hand to stop him. "No, don't you dare try to justify this. She was on an operating table, risking her life, and you were nowhere in sight. Your entire fortune doesn't matter if you can't even show up for your own child's birth." The weight of guilt pressed Adrian's shoulders. He sat in a nearby chair, burying his face in his hands. Selina finally broke the tense silence. "It's too late for excuses, Adrian. Our child is in an incubator, fighting for life, and you're fighting for money." Her voice broke. She turned away, tears sliding down her face, signaling the end of the conversation. The next few days were a test of endurance for everyone involved. The newborn, named Skylar, weighed barely 3 pounds. Tubes fed her oxygen and nourishment. Each day was a tightrope walk between relief and despair. Selina's own condition slowly improved, but emotional scars ran deep. Adrian came to the hospital daily, bringing flowers, expensive pastries from high-end bakeries, and even a specialized nurse. But these gestures landed flat. Selina was cordial but distant. Sasha openly disliked him, often rolling her eyes and walking away whenever he approached. The medical staff whispered among themselves, exchanging knowing looks every time. Adrian walked down the corridor. He could sense their silent judgment, but he was too proud or too ashamed to address it. Late one evening, Adrian lingered by the NICU window. He gazed at Skylar, so tiny, yet fighting so bravely. A pang of remorse tore at his heart. He realized he hadn't once held her in his arms. He had allowed circumstances and his obsession with success to rob him of the miracle of being there when she took her first breath. An overwhelming feeling of isolation set in. Everything he had worked for, his empire, his fortune, his reputation, seemed hollow in the face of an infant struggling for each breath. He realized, perhaps too late, that he had lost something far more precious, Selina's trust and the joyful innocence of a new life entering the world. Silent tears streaked his cheeks. The once invincible Adrian Miles felt his facade crumbling. Days turned into a week. Selina grew stronger, ready to be discharged, though baby Skylar would likely stay in the NICU for several more weeks. Sasha had taken time off her own job to support Selina. Adrian spent his days juggling phone calls in the hospital lobby, still chasing the next big deal. But he tried to carve out intervals to sit quietly with Selina, to talk if she would let him. Most of the time, she had little to say. One afternoon, Dr. Rivera met them in a small consultation room. He explained the next steps for Skylar's care, emphasizing that preterm babies need extensive monitoring and that parental involvement, skin-to-skin contact, nurturing presence, could significantly impact Skylar's development. He showed them a chart of recommended NICU visitation hours and made it clear that emotional stress could also affect Selina's well-being and recovery. Adrian nodded, wearing a mask of attentiveness, but his phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket. Selina noticed. She sighed, thanking Dr. Rivera and indicating she understood. When they left the room, Adrian tried to speak to Selina, but she brushed past him to return to Skylar's incubator. A new wave of hopelessness washed over Adrian. The truth was, he felt powerless. All the money in the world couldn't buy him the chance to correct his absence at the most crucial moment. The clock couldn't be turned back. His previously unstoppable drive for success was now overshadowed by the intangible cost to his family. Over the next week, Selina was officially discharged. Sasha helped her settle into a small suite at a nearby residence that the hospital recommended for parents with infants in intensive care. Adrian wrote a check without hesitation, covering all expenses. It was the least he could do, though he felt it was a band-aid on a bullet wound. Despite everything, there were small moments of joy. Selina was allowed to hold Skylar for brief intervals. Skin-to-skin contact helped regulate the baby's heartbeat and breathing. Selina's eyes shone with love and a fierce protectiveness, even through her exhaustion. Adrian watched from a distance, longing to be included, to feel the warmth of his child's tiny body against his own chest. But each time he approached, Selina's expression warned him off. She was not yet ready to forgive, or perhaps she never would be. One afternoon, at a nurse's insistence, Selina reluctantly allowed Adrian to hold Skylar. The nurse explained that both parents bonding with the baby was critical for emotional development. Selina stood to one side, arms crossed, her gaze wary. Adrian gingerly cradled Skylar, tears welling up as he felt the fragile life in his arms. The baby's eyes fluttered open for a split second, then closed again, as if too tired to see the man who was supposed to protect her. Overwhelmed, Adrian whispered apologies to the tiny baby, his voice choked with regret. Just when it seemed they had reached a tense equilibrium, external forces converged. Adrian's massive deal, the very one he had prioritized over Selina's emergency, began to unravel. Rumors of misconduct surfaced, suggesting he had cut corners or manipulated valuations to sweeten the negotiations. The European investors threatened legal action, sending shockwaves through Adrian's network. The press caught wind of it too, spinning headlines about Adrian Miles's questionable ethics. Board members from his various companies were furious. Stocks in his publicly traded ventures took a sharp dip, wiping out millions from his net worth overnight. His phone exploded with frantic calls from business associates, lawyers, and journalists. The empire he had built, piece by piece, threatened to collapse in spectacular fashion. Worse yet, the negative publicity found its way into the hospital gossip. Nurses and doctors who once admired Adrian for his philanthropic donations now whispered about whether those donations were ethically sourced. Did he give out of genuine compassion or just for positive PR? The tension in the corridors multiplied. Selina, overhearing some of the murmurs, felt a mixture of sorrow and grim validation. Adrian's world was falling apart precisely when Selina and Skylar needed him the most. It felt like cosmic retribution, a karmic balancing of the scales. The emptiness he had sown at his wife's side had now blossomed into chaos in his professional sphere. Within days, paparazzi circled Johns Hopkins Hospital, hoping to catch glimpses of Adrian or Selina. Reporters asked invasive questions about the couple's relationship and the baby's condition. Some tabloids even published scandalous rumors implying the baby's premature birth was a stress-induced consequence of Adrian's unscrupulous dealings. The hospital's PR team intervened, increasing security measures. They asked Selina if she wanted to relocate to a more private facility. Worn out, worried about her baby, she simply shook her head. "I just want my child to get well," she murmured. Her eyes had lost that sparkle Adrian had once loved so dearly. Adrian himself moved from one urgent crisis to the next. He was forced to resign from 2 boards under intense pressure. In official statements, he cited personal family matters as his reason for stepping away. His attorney advised him to maintain a low profile, which only fueled public curiosity. The press wanted a juicy scandal. They wanted to see the once revered Adrian Miles finally exposed. For Selina, it was surreal. She had gone from being a behind-the-scenes wife who adored art galleries to being thrust into a maelstrom of paparazzi, waiting cameras, and suspicious headlines. And through it all, she felt an unrelenting sense of betrayal. As her baby fought for survival, Adrian's empire burned with the flames of 1,000 unfulfilled promises. One evening, after the paparazzi had drifted away for the night, Sasha found Selina in the hospital chapel. Candles flickered against stained glass windows, casting a gentle light that played across Selina's weary face. Sasha approached quietly, sitting beside her on a wooden pew. "How are you holding up?" Sasha asked, concern lacing her voice. Selina wrapped her arms around herself, tired, angry, worried about Skylar, confused about Adrian. Her eyes filled with tears. "He used to be so kind, Sasha. So genuine. Now I don't even recognize him." Sasha placed a comforting arm around Selina's shoulders. "Money changes people, or maybe it just amplifies what's already there. But I don't think he's evil. I think he got lost in it all." Selina nodded, tears falling. "I sometimes wonder if there was a moment I could have changed. Things could have told him to slow down, or told him that his next big deal wasn't worth everything else. But I was scared. I wanted him to be happy, to chase his dreams, just like I chased mine." Sasha sighed. "You can't blame yourself for his choices. He's an adult. You might have tried to support him, but he's the one who got caught up chasing illusions." They sat in silence for a while, the hush of the chapel enveloping them. Eventually, Selina wiped her tears and found a fragile resolve. "I need to be strong for Skylar. Whatever happens between me and Adrian, she deserves my full attention." Sasha squeezed her hand. "I'm here for both of you, always." As the legal and financial crises escalated, Adrian realized that his resources were draining fast. He was forced to sell off smaller assets to keep his main holdings afloat. The dream property in Europe, the one that had sparked this entire fiasco, now hung in limbo. His negotiations crumbled, leaving him with partial liabilities and none of the promised returns. With nowhere else to turn, Adrian decided to approach Selina's father, Robert. Though Robert wasn't nearly as wealthy, he held significant influence in the art world and had a circle of affluent connections. Adrian arranged a meeting at a quiet cafe near the hospital. Robert listened, expression grave, as Adrian stumbled through an explanation of how a brilliant opportunity had turned into a nightmare. He asked if Robert could introduce him to potential investors or sign on as a guarantor for a crucial loan. Robert remained silent for a few moments, absorbing Adrian's desperate pleas. Then he spoke softly but firmly. "My daughter almost lost her life, and my granddaughter entered this world prematurely. Where were you? I understand business. I also understand family. And I can't, in good conscience, help you now. I'm sorry, Adrian, but some lines you don't cross." The finality in Robert's voice was like a steel door slamming shut. Adrian's heart sank. He rose from the table, shaking hands weakly with Robert, feeling the last vestiges of his grand ambitions slip away. This was a man who once saw potential in him, admired his hustle. Now that door was firmly closed. Days passed, and the situation at the hospital remained tense. Skylar's condition showed slow improvement, though she'd still need close monitoring. Adrian, burdened by shame and the weight of his collapsing empire, began to withdraw. He'd show up at odd hours, sometimes in the middle of the night, quietly peering into the NICU. He offered half-baked apologies to Selina, who rarely responded. Eventually, there came a day when Selina sat by Skylar's incubator, watching her tiny daughter breathe. Adrian approached cautiously. In a soft voice, he said, "I'm leaving for a while. I need to fix this mess I've made. I realize I'm no good to you or Skylar in this state. I want to come back a better man." Selina turned to him, her eyes unreadable. "Do what you have to do," she replied evenly. "Skylar and I will be here. I can't promise what we'll feel for you when you return, but I'm too exhausted to fight or argue anymore." Adrian swallowed hard, reaching out as if to touch Selina's shoulder, then stopping. He looked at Skylar in the incubator, tears forming at the corners of his eyes. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Selina alone in the softly lit NICU. Sasha, who had witnessed the conversation from a short distance, approached quietly to comfort her friend. Adrian disappeared from the hospital scene. Some days, Selina wondered if he'd truly left the country or if he was in some downtown apartment, plotting his comeback. It hardly mattered. Her focus was on baby Skylar, who was slowly gaining weight and showing signs of progress. Dr. Rivera expressed cautious optimism that the baby would eventually thrive. Relieved to see Skylar improving, Selina directed her energies toward emotional healing. She attended a support group for mothers of premature infants, where she found solace in shared struggles. Many of those women had faced adversity, though rarely in the form of an absent millionaire husband. Even so, they provided each other with empathy, coffee, and unconditional understanding. With Sasha's unwavering support, Selina began searching for a smaller, more modest apartment closer to the hospital. She had made the decision that returning to the penthouse, filled with memories and illusions, would be too painful. Adrian had wired her enough money for her immediate needs, but she wanted to stand on her own feet eventually. She made calls to old connections in the art world, hoping to revive her dream of curating a gallery or working with museums. Life continued, albeit with a persistent ache in her chest. Skylar's health improved enough that doctors allowed Selina to take her home, albeit with strict instructions and regular checkups. Holding her tiny daughter for the first car ride was a triumphant moment for Selina. No paparazzi, no drama, just a new mother and her child braving the world together. She moved into a cozy two-bedroom apartment with Sasha's help. Sunlight poured through the windows onto pastel walls decorated with subtle artistic prints. It was nothing like the marble-laden penthouse, but it felt more like home than that cold palace ever had. Here, Selina could focus on healing, on motherhood, on regaining her identity. Occasionally, she checked the news to see updates on Adrian's companies. The headlines were rarely kind. Lawsuits, bankruptcy filings, and rumored shady partnerships filled the reports. She tried to feel pity or sorrow, but mostly she felt numb. She wondered if this was what Adrian had to go through to truly learn what mattered. Months rolled by. Skylar grew healthier, starting to smile and coo in that adorable way that melted Selina's heart. Sasha visited daily, providing moral support, babysitting help, and the occasional comedic relief. The day Selina finally returned to an art gallery, Skylar in a stroller, she felt a small spark of her old self. Her eyes misted over as she gazed at paintings by emerging local artists, remembering a time when she imagined forging a career in the art world. Maybe, she thought, it's not too late. But the biggest surprise came when Sasha arrived one afternoon, anxiety written on her face. "I heard a rumor," she said, sitting at Selina's small dining table. "Adrian is back in town. Someone saw him near the hospital. He might be looking for you and Skylar." Selina's heart skipped a beat. I don't know what to say to him," she admitted. "After everything, can we just close that chapter?" Sasha shrugged sympathetically. "He's still Skylar's father, for better or worse. But it's up to you. Don't feel pressured to see him if you're not ready." For the rest of the day, Selina was on edge, watching the hallway outside her apartment as if expecting Adrian to appear out of thin air. He didn't, but a swirling mix of dread and unresolved sadness settled over her, reminding her that some wounds still festered beneath the surface. A week later, Adrian emailed Selina, having presumably lost her new phone number. The message was short, "Selina. I'm back in the city. I'm a changed man. I want to see you and Skylar. Even if you never want me in your life, please let me see our daughter, Adrian." Selina stared at the screen for a long time. Skylar cooed from her crib in the corner of the room. She thought of the pain, the betrayal, and the humiliations. But she also thought of their younger days, the dinners in cramped apartments, the love that once burned so bright. With a trembling hand, she typed a response. "Adrian, I'm not sure if I'm ready. Skylar is healthy, but still needs care and routine. If you truly want to see her, Meet me at the park near my apartment tomorrow afternoon, 2 p.m. I'll bring her stroller, Selina. She didn't sleep well that night, unsure if she'd made the right decision. Morning came, bringing a blend of resolve and stomach-churning nerves. At exactly 2 p.m., Selina arrived at the park. The air was crisp, and a light breeze stirred the leaves on the oak trees. She pushed Skylar's stroller along a paved path, scanning the area. A moment later, she spotted Adrian, sitting on a bench near a small pond. He looked thinner, weary, but somehow more human. Gone were the designer suits. He wore a simple sweater and jeans. His eyes brightened when he saw Selina and Skylar approaching. He stood up, hesitant steps carrying him closer. "Hi," he managed, voice shaking. Selina nodded, struggling to maintain composure. She lifted Skylar gently, cradling her so Adrian could see her face. The baby stared curiously at the stranger before her. Adrian's eyes welled up as he lifted a trembling hand to Skylar's cheek. "She's so beautiful," he whispered. For a few moments, he seemed lost in wonder, gently stroking the soft tuft of hair on her head. Skylar wriggled, letting out a small sound of protest, and Selina instinctively adjusted her posture, protective as ever. They found a nearby bench and sat, neither quite knowing what to say. Finally, Adrian broke the silence. "I lost almost everything. The lawsuits, the debt, the bad press. I had to liquidate most of my assets to settle. I live in a tiny, furnished apartment now. No more luxury, no more illusions." His voice trembled on that final word. Selina listened quietly, her emotions whirling. "I'm sorry," she said softly, not entirely sure if she meant it or if she was just acknowledging his words. Adrian bowed his head. "I deserved it," he responded. "I should have been there for you and Skylar. I still can't forgive myself. Every day I think about the moment I got that phone call telling me you were in the ER, and I chose to stay on that conference call." His eyes glistened with tears he didn't bother hiding. Selina's eyes filled too, unspoken memories bubbling to the surface. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she admitted. Skylar suffered. I suffered. We nearly lost everything that day. But I also see that you're taking responsibility now, and that matters. They spoke for over an hour. Adrian confessed how the swirl of power and ambition had blinded him. Selina shared how lonely she'd been, how devastating it was to give birth without him. Both cried in equal measure. By the end, there were no quick fixes or fairy tale resolutions, but there was a raw honesty between them that hadn't existed for years. In the weeks that followed, Adrian tried to show he'd changed through actions, not words. He asked if he could help care for Skylar, at least occasionally, so Selina could rest or run errands. She hesitated at first, but relented. To her surprise, Adrian proved gentle and attentive with Skylar, learning how to change diapers, mix formula, and even soothe her through colic bouts. Slowly, a cautious trust began to form. Yet, Selina made it clear she was not ready to move back in as a family. The time for that might never come. Adrian understood, respecting her boundaries. He started looking for honest work, far from the cutthroat real estate scene he once dominated. He considered consulting or small-scale property management, anything that allowed him a fresh start without succumbing to the same corrupting influences. Meanwhile, Selina took steps to follow her passion for art again. Through Sasha's connections, she secured a part-time job at a local gallery. It was modest work but fulfilling. Standing amidst paintings and sculptures gave her a sense of purpose beyond motherhood, a reminder of who she was before life swept her into turmoil. Their journey became one of quiet perseverance. Adrian was forced to live with the consequences of his choices, financially and emotionally. Selina learned the power of resilience, transforming her heartbreak into a protective love for her daughter and a determination to build a stable future. One day, as they sat in Selina's modest living room, Adrian visiting with Skylar, crawling on the carpet, he turned to her. "Thank you for letting me be a part of her life. I know I'll never erase what happened, but I hope I can at least be a good father from here on out." Selena watched Skylar squeal with delight, reaching for a stuffed toy. She nodded. "We can't undo the past, Adrian, but maybe we can create a better future for her." They shared a small smile, a tenuous truce. Outside, the world was still abuzz with sensational stories of Adrian's downfall. But in that small living room, the promise of a fragile peace outshone any scandal. Over time, the lawsuits died down. Adrian was left with just enough to live a humble but not impoverished life. He sold off the penthouse, funneling part of the money into a trust fund for Skylar's future. The rest he used to settle more debts, leaving him financially strapped but morally unburdened. Selena and Adrian never fully rekindled their old romance. Too many wounds ran too deep, but they reached an arrangement that allowed Adrian to be a present, responsible father. On weekends, he took Skylar to the park, read her stories, and marveled at her innocent joy. In return, Selena felt her anger gradually subside, replaced by cautious respect for the man he was trying to become. Some nights she still cried, haunted by the memory of that day in the hospital. But each morning, Skylar's giggle reminded her that life was a tapestry woven from threads of pain, love, regret, and hope. And for Selena, that hope was enough. That was how karma finally came full circle. Adrian, once soaring high above the rest of the world, had been brought low by his own neglect. The universe had found a way to humble him, shattering his illusions of invincibility. His name, once revered among wealthy circles, became a cautionary tale of a man who forgot that family was more valuable than the largest bank account. While many tragedies end in bitterness, this story found a different resolution. Adrian learned that humility and genuine love must stand at the core of any lasting success. Selena discovered that resilience can transform the darkest chapters into passages of renewal. And baby Skylar, small though she was, became the living proof that miracles could bloom in the wake of despair. Years passed. Skylar grew stronger, blossoming into a lively toddler who loved to scribble on paper, with crayons perhaps inheriting her mother's artistic leanings. Adrian continued his path of redemption, working as an independent consultant for eco-friendly housing projects, a far cry from his once grand empire, but meaningful work that allowed him to make a difference. Selena opened a small art studio with Sasha, hosting workshops for children and aspiring artists in the community. She found peace in that creative space, painting away her sorrow and forging new dreams each day. Skylar often crawled around the studio, giggling at the colorful canvases and occasionally adding her own toddler masterpieces to the walls. Though Adrian and Selena's relationship remained platonic, they co-parented with grace. Family moments, birthday parties, holiday dinners were warm, if not perfectly seamless. The doctors who once attended Selena in the ER were amazed by how healthy Skylar had become, never forgetting how precarious her first weeks of life were. They often used her story to inspire new parents facing similar challenges, emphasizing that love and perseverance can overcome even the direst odds. In the end, Selena found solace not in Adrian's wealth, but in the love she poured into Skylar and her newfound passion for community art. Adrian, meanwhile, learned that true success isn't measured by properties or bank statements, but by how we care for those who rely on us the most. Together, though their paths diverged, they managed to create a nurturing environment for the life they had brought into the world. Their story stood as a reminder that no fortune can replace the time and devotion a family needs. Karma had swept in, exacting a toll, but leaving behind a space for growth and atonement. And in that space, Selena and Adrian, once unstoppable in their ambition, became quietly unstoppable in their love for a tiny girl named Skylar, who would grow up never doubting that she was worth more than any $1 million deal. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster that tested the boundaries of love, loyalty, and redemption. Selena's unwavering strength and Adrian's painful journey from fortune to humility show us that material wealth pales in comparison to a family's well-being. Each twist in their story brought new revelations, ultimately proving that life is precious, and time with loved ones can never be replaced, even by the grandest of successes. If this powerful story moved your heart, please remember to give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales. Your support keeps us going, ensuring that we can continue bringing you stories that touch the soul and spark conversation. Stay tuned for more dramatic, heartfelt narratives, and always remember, real success lies not in money, but in love, resilience, and personal growth.